Good afternoon. We're going to start shortly, but I'd like to say everyone who's dialed in early or on time, thank you very much. Distinguished guests, panelists, and all those who do not identify as such, welcome to the 5th episode of the Data Leadership Series. My name is Frank Consultancy. I'm going to be your host and guide this afternoon, or morning, or evening, depending on whether you've dialed in from APAC. Good luck with that. You're staying up very, very late. Naughty you. I have the privilege of introducing Sean Russell. Give us a wave, Sean. Sean
Hello,
Russell,
Frank.
Principal Consultant at Ortecha and representing the sanity voice. Get your data sorted before we jump into the sexy AI stuff. We have heavy hitter slash... I'm not going to go there. I was going to go with the whole Bond villain sort of thing, given your background. You look like you should be presenting from what looks like a very fancy studio. Ben Clinch, the inimitable Ben Clinch. Very useful in
Wonderful
Clinch.
to be here, Frank.
And Dr. Dan Ballin, the CEO of Ideas Crucible, who literally could not be more educated in the topic. Welcome, Dan.
Welcome.
So, a little introduction. Oh God, is he going to do talking whilst I have to read? Yes, I am. And you do have to keep up. Last episode, we talked about data products. We were debunking some of it. We probably overcooked the restaurant metaphor just a little bit, but it was important to put things in context, the data supply chain, the product life cycle, understanding the role of governance, and whether or not productization of your data really is a great way to derive value from it, not just monetize it. Here, we're talking about a rather interesting topic. We're talking about A, data, great, just great. I'm all blurred. B, money. So how do you go from data on the hard disk to monetization? Well, we're here to bust some myths with this amazing panel. We're here to talk about AI, artificial intelligence, what it is, what it isn't, where we are now, and why it's important. So it's a divisive topic. Ask the average lay person on the street or screaming on Reddit, and they will say AI is one thing. It means one thing to them. It means it's coming to steal our jobs. It's Skynet from the Terminator movies. It's a great accelerant of innovation across the workforce. Many, many diverse opinions. And what happens when you have heterogeneous opinions? You get a large cacophony of people, especially angry people on the internet saying, I'm all for AI. AI is going to change the world. And why aren't you? Or you get some very equally angry people saying, AI shouldn't change the world. We don't want AI. Don't put AI in my soup. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's already here. Caveat emptor, which loosely translates as buyer beware. Without clean data, AI is going to become a failure at scale. Everything that AI, machine learning, and all of the other techniques around AI, it's all about the acceleration and the automation of what exactly. So we're going to be providing some guidance on what AI is and what AI isn't. We're going to look at some of the underlying concepts that are fueling recent advances in AI. Now, the most important thing here is that we feel that this is a safe space. As ever, I'm here to represent the needs of the constituents, my target audience. I will be nice to my panelists, but I'm going to ask some hard questions. I would like everybody to introduce themselves now. Can everyone see the chat box? Let's jump in. Part 1, what do we mean by AI? Dan, I'm going to throw this question to you first, right? We've got the Terminator movies talking about Skynet. We've got Ray Kurzweil talking about the singularity. We've got some people who say AI started in the 50s. Set the record straight, my man. What do we mean by AI in this discussion?
Thanks, Frank. So, I would define AI as machines or computers acting or behaving in a way kind of that either looks like or behaves like you would associate with an animal or a human at the end of the day. So doing something that would appear to be smart at the end of the day. And I guess there's kind of two kind of branches of areas that I guess AI is known for. There's, coming back to the kind of generalized intelligence, machines that are self-aware and conscious at the end of the day, which would probably be out of scope for this webinar, which is the kind of area where we're kind of thinking robots are going to take over the world and everything. But then there's, what's known as narrow AI or weak AI, sometimes as it's called, which is typically focused on a specific task, and has been in many ways around for many decades. Everything from playing a game of chess or facial recognition on the back of our phone that we use on our phones every day. And it is many ways, many of those elements are all coming together and being, they're getting stronger and better. So for me, there's a whole set of kind of technologies and tools and everything else in AI. There's machine learning, which I'm sure we'll come on to, which is one aspect of AI, but there's many areas of disciplines such as computer vision, planning, scheduling, speech recognition, as we all know with our smart kind of devices at home, robotics, decision-making, technologies that can help deal with uncertainty at the end of the day. And then I guess the one thing worth saying is there's the whole area of generative AI, which brought AI into the public consciousness recently, as it's received much more consumer attention. And that's the ability to create text, images, video, music, generatively at the end of the day, using various techniques from machine learning.
That's a wonderful introduction. So we're looking at narrow AI as opposed to super intelligence, and we're looking at generative and predictive applications of that technology, of which machine learning is one of several techniques. Is that a fair summation?
It is, and it's a great summation at the end of the day. And we're going to see some of these technologies embedded and fusing and mixing with many of them together. So at the end of the day.
Wonderful introduction. So you mentioned generative AI, and I sincerely hope this is the last time I have to mention it, but ChatGPT burst onto the scene less than a year ago, and it set a record for 100 million downloads in 2 months, making it the fastest growing consumer application in the history of consumer applications. I have a hypothesis that is not for this webinar, that ChatGPT is also setting another record for the fastest number of uninstalls once people realized that it was just giving them a whole bunch of hallucinatory garbage. But then we went to ChatGPT 3, 3.5, 4. In less than a year, we've gone from a convincing statistical arrangement of words on a screen to something that's actually not bad. Not great, but it's not bad. And now you've got multimodal inputs from speech, like Dan mentioned, text, images, all built on this transformer architecture, which we're going to dig into. But the most important thing I wanted to mention is this is in the public consciousness. There was Rishi Sunak's AI summit. There was President Biden's executive overreach in legislation, as some people would say. Some people say it doesn't go far enough and doesn't have enough teeth. It's in the public consciousness. The amount of funding that has gone into accelerating this investment cycle, it's huge. Speak to the average venture capitalist, say, if it ain't got AI in it, I ain't interested. Ben, setting aside the point that the scale of this and the speed at which it's coming out makes it a board level conversation, why is AI important to business now?
Okay, so there's a range of different reasons, but I'm just to riff first of all on the point that you and Dan were discussing, the different types of AI that we've been living with for many years, associated with being able to image recognition, being able to recognize plants and so forth. Things have been, people may not realize, that their phones have been using AI for a very long time. What really brought it home right now and is that it's been democratized. So people have been able to get access to it and start to use it. And the price point associated with being able to interact with it has greatly reduced. I mean, GPT-1 itself, the original model related to ChatGPT, came out in 2018. But it was actually when it became that much more accessible and released it to a wider audience, that suddenly everybody got super excited about this. And of course, it is more sophisticated than it was in its first iterations, as you'd expect. Why this is taking off in terms of why it's important for businesses right now is because, of course, it creates an incredible competitive advantage if you can harness it correctly, but it's also a great threat if it's imperfectly implemented. So actually it could be a great differentiator in any organization if they can get this right. I think one of the things that I'd also like to state is that the revolution associated with being able to interact with a computer in a far more natural way for human beings seems extremely exciting, but actually things like SQL and other means of querying data in a scientifically accurate manner have been around for a very long time, and actually provide very, very good ways of disambiguating stuff that otherwise would be quite difficult to ascertain using language. So actually, with giving us the broader way of interacting with this, and presumably not needing to hire so many SQL analysts, one might expect. In fact, we now need to have specialists who can interact with the large language models in a way that enable them to be able to use language in a more precise way than general humans speak. So now we're talking about prompt engineers and so forth. So in fact, it's creating new roles associated with that ambiguity that's inherent in the English language and other languages indeed. So incredible opportunity associated with the ability to be able to speed up things, everyday tasks, empower people in their roles, preferably keeping humans in the loop to make sure that the hallucinations that you mentioned, Frank, are kept in check, but also the ability to be able to leverage a greater set of knowledge across an organization in a far more speedy manner. So it's an incredible opportunity, but the real challenge and the nuance which people are struggling with, from government right the way through to small businesses, is how are they going to harness this in a way that's safe for their organization and to get maximum competitive advantage.
Are you using generative AI?
We certainly are. And
30 seconds, explain how.
So we're using it in many different ways. We are, but predominantly we're exploring the different use cases associated with, for example, the kind of things where you can improve people's work by better understanding policies and the rules and regulations that people need to apply to all of the designs. For example, as an architect, we would be saying, there are certain policies and guardrails that I've created, for example, that we can make more accessible to people who are doing designs. And by being able to interact with large language models, either directly through chat or by submitting documents that would enable them to be able to get an assessment and improve it quickly.
Well, I may or may not be using generative AI right now. The real Frank Sullivan could be on a beach in the Bahamas, and I could be a very finely tuned model. So, setting the stage, we're talking about narrow AI for predictive and generative use cases. Ben has articulated why this is important. Sean, most important conclusion of part one here. What value use cases should our data leaders be considering? We've talked about AI here to change the world, and then we've talked about the evil, unethical uses. Give me something practical. What can we work with? What do CDOs need to be investing in now?
So it's such a great question, and before we get to it, just to build on Ben's excellent answer, I think not only are there a raft of wonderful opportunities, which I'm about to get to some, but the pace of change is just it's relentless. So these things are going to become realities quickly. So moving on, to make sure that you are mitigating risk, that you are getting things in order, is so important. But use cases, excellent use cases for AI. So this is the data leadership series, so I took a data leadership approach. I think that from a business perspective, you've got things like fraud or threat detection. So using AI to detect suspicious logins, to detect specious mortgage applications, things like that, fraudulent transactions, identity theft. You've got semantic analysis. So take those customer bots that are okay right now and just about doing the job, and take it up a notch, start collecting data in and understanding how your customers feel about how you interact with them. From a data management perspective, which is very close to home for me, you've got things like automated lineage. For the first time, it might be true that a real automated lineage solution is right around the corner. I know a lot of people are working on it. That's incredible. I think data catalogs that leverage large language models to understand what you're trying to ask for, even if you haven't said quite the right thing, and also nudge you into using the right terminology, what Ben was saying about making sure that you've got standard language, because AI needs you to speak in a very standard way in order to understand it. And that's just some of the many. I mean, generative AI, I could go on forever. Generative AI assisted reporting. But again, as Ben and Dan have both said, this needs to happen with human assistance. And that's the key point, right? Because you can't trust a hallucinating machine without some kind of oversight. And certainly, you can't trust a machine making a decision at all if the data behind it isn't trustworthy. And that's going to be key.
That's a great point. It's actually illegal in some cases.
Absolutely.
For decisions to be automated.
Yep.
Working on a medical use case right now, I know the best that I can create in assisted reproductive technology is decision support. I have no doubt that within 10 years, the legislature will catch up with the framework where, how can a single GP in 10 minutes compete with 10 million hours of training from 1,000 doctors over 10 years? They can't, right? But no matter how fast and how accurate you make that decision, there always needs to be accountability and sign off. So where is decision support, the first 20% or the 99% of a decision? That's a fascinating point.
Frank, you're making a great point. And I think you're absolutely right. The legislation will catch up. People will catch up and business will catch up. The key there is, will they be taking their risk controls along with for the journey? That's going to be key.
Right. I wanted to give you guys 5 minutes extra to answer this part because you're on a roll. So I've got 2 questions here. 30 seconds. Can you elaborate on how you do automated lineage? Calibra. Sorry, that's a plug for our partners there. Am I even allowed to do that?
Look, yeah, absolutely. One aspect of it. So there are different types of lineage, of course. There's technical lineage, which is field level, and the transformations that happen between a field and a table in one system, potentially internally to that system, but often it's between systems over APIs and various different things where you can actually harvest that. That doesn't always tell you what you really need to know associated with the data, which is it can tell you that this field is mapped to another field, but it can't necessarily tell you what that data means. So why do we care? Well, things like personally identifiable information flowing between systems is highly relevant to use cases like GDPR Article 30, purpose of processing, to say, and also to potentially trigger tokenization depending on the security controls that you have in place. So actually understanding what the nature of the data, just in that example, personally identifiable information is mainly around privacy and security, but there are other aspects where you want to detect what type of data that is for value perspective. So you can say, look, we know what this is, we can now harvest this for a beneficial use case. Semantic discovery, which is the capability to be able to understand truly what that data means in a human, or semantic being another word for meaning, it enables you to actually say, from a business perspective, this data actually means this to us, and then we can determine how we use this. It's an important part of DCAM and CDMC, the EDM Council's sort of structures. AI helps you understand the meaning of the data rather than just the technical aspects of it that you can then use to further business value.
It's an excellent point, and there is a huge decoupling of the data element and the business element. Go back to our data strategy or ops model to learn more about that. Sean, 30 seconds. What tools do you use for automated lineage?
That's a great question. So I think you were on the right track with Calibra. If you're going to, I mean, that's one of several data governance and data management tools I think that are exploring the automated pathway that semantic analysis can bring. But yeah, I think it's a super. Right now, it's kind of a super open and developing field. I know Microsoft has a stake in it. I know Calibra and Informatica have stakes in as well.
Leon in the chat box just wants everybody here to know that he'll be right back. Thank you, Leon.
Excellent.
We'll send him a recording.
Part 2. I need to move us on. What are the components of AI? Now, we thought about rephrasing this question as what are the moving parts, but that would imply that there are static parts. When what I read this morning about generative AI is not the same thing that I'm going to read this afternoon because of the pace of change. Dan, we've kind of elucidated a little bit on the use cases around service bots, mortgage applications, fraud detection, threat intelligence from Sean. What do you think the moving parts are?
So in many ways, the previous discussion referring to data lineage is a good example, is a case point, but I can give some others. It's a good case point in that actually a lot of what's going to be happening in artificial intelligence isn't about taking the enterprise architectures and ripping them out at the end of the day. You're still going to have your existing data that's currently in its data lakes and data warehouses and spread across your organization at the end of the day. You're still going to have those problem spaces that you've always had, such as managing fraud, managing compliance, customer service at the end of the day. You will have enterprise architecture systems there at the end of the day, databases. Already we've had SQL referenced, for instance, right down to your Oracle systems and everything else at the end of the day. But we're going to see AI integrated as layers, either built into those kind of products that we procure as features, or something that we will add on as a bolt-on or integrator to make our systems smarter. So the one thing we will say is we have data across organizations, our customer data, our market intelligence data. The one area of data where we're probably going to be building upon is creating models which our AI can act on. So yes, obviously the example of large language models is something we're familiar with, but it could be anything modeling. For instance, we refer to humans in the loop in the case of medical before. Already we're seeing over a 280% increase in kind of mammogram detection in the decision support area tool by detecting where, for instance, there's likely tumors, for instance. And that's something we're seeing in many areas, not just in medical, but equally so assistive technologies in legal tech and compliance techs. So yeah, models, decision engines, they'll be all added on, and they'll be coming as all singing solutions, but equally so, we need to be smarter with procuring those. And that's one of the areas that I think is going to be one of the learning lessons for a lot of companies who throw themselves into this great opportunity, that they need to procure smartly, just like they would procure a database or a network or any other part of their enterprise.
That's a pretty comprehensive overview, and I think you've done well to pick up most of the major components for narrow intelligence: predictive, prescriptive, and generative. I think since we're talking about machine learning, and Dan, you've caveated the definition well by saying it's a part of AI, but it is a dominant part, so I want to pick that up. We've talked about data quality, automated lineage. I think Ian's got a fascinating question here, because, and he certainly won't be alone. A lot of people are trying to figure out and get their heads around, how do I use automated data lineage? How do I improve understanding of a semantic graph, or when does data become knowledge using AI or LLMs giving voice to a large amount of unstructured data? I know for a fact that BT has 29 petabytes of data. So that's a type of problem right there. Ben, you're kind of sitting in the intersection. You're the architect, not the painter. You have to serve this stuff up to the people who want to consume AI. I think you're best positioned to answer this question.
Thank you. It's a wonderful question, and thank you for posing it, Ian. One of the things that I think is really powerful, of course, the semantic discovery we talked about. It can tell you, the meaning of the data. It can tell you the type of data in a far more automatable and scalable and flexible manner than you can by manually tagging it. But to your point, how do you apply data quality to that? Well, there are two different angles, I would say. One is there are certain data quality measures that might be inherent with the type of data it is. So if it's a date, then you might say, well, look, it has to be UTC or a Gregorian format or something along these lines, which is just generic associated with the type of data. But real data quality is the fitness for purpose. So depending on what you're using that data for, you would apply data quality specifically to that. Now, that is not always easy to detect through pure semantic discovery, but you can leverage it through understanding who's requesting access to it, and when they request access to it, be a system or an individual, you record the purpose. So this is a standard usage contract stroke data sharing type of thing. You can harvest that in the context of it. So to give you an example of contextual data quality, I always look at Internet of Things. Imagine you had thousands of, maybe hundreds of thousands of temperature sensors distributed across the UK. They're all telling you, that it's kind of a bit drab, the weather at the moment, as we saw from the chat. But occasionally they'll drop out. Maybe there's a problem that you end up with a temperature hitting 0. Now, that could be a fault in the sensor. Now, if your use case is to get accurate average temperature, that is a data quality issue. You've got a real problem. You don't want that data, those dropouts to happen. But if your use case or parallel use case is to say, I need to know when this temperature sensor becomes faulty, and I need to think about starting to replace it, that's the gold. Where it drops out is telling you that you need to now start to schedule certain aspects associated with the replacement of those sensors. So actually, it's always the fitness for purpose. And if you can link that purpose through to the type of data and then teach the algorithm that this is a common sort of set of data quality, then you're onto a winner, and you can scale this thing beautifully. So hopefully that helps. It's a bit of a long answer, but I wanted to give you the context.
We might be able to keep the webinar open for an additional 10 minutes at the end if anyone wants to stay and discuss this privately. So I need to move us on. We've talked about the components behind AI. We've talked about the concept of the data store, the feature store, the importance of the tooling around provisioning the data and looking at the data supply chain, the data pipelines. And then we've talked about the different, is it a fuzzy logic thing? Is it an ML thing? Is it a computer vision thing? So we've looked at all those different applied techniques. What we haven't talked about are the risks, right? It's often said that if training is the most important aspect of machine learning, so that you can do things at superhuman speeds, at massively distributed levels, at scale, then who's not to say that the bias behind your candidate when you are screening a bunch of job applications isn't a mistake at scale? Sean.
An excellent point. And that's the real key of understanding AI in business today and tomorrow, is understanding the risks associated with it. And as you say, you're training on a data set that is more massive than any one person can sit down and read and understand. And you're feeding it into an algorithm whose job it is to do a certain thing. But that algorithm or that AI, it reads that data like a child reads data. There's nothing behind it. There's no intent. It's just soaking it all up and understanding it. So, for example, if you tell if your data set states that 70% of your customer base are old white men, then you say, who should get higher credit limits? Well, we do great business with old white men. Old white men should get higher credit limits than other people. These are the sorts of mental gymnastics, I'm going to say, that an AI pulls together, because an AI doesn't really do anything mental. There's no mental process going on. There's no kind of association with the history or with people in general. And without people behind that to provide a governance structure and an ethical structure that to that data set before training, and then to the algorithm and on to every moving part in AI, then you will continue to have problems. And of course, we've seen, massive companies like Apple having issues, and Goldman Sachs having issues with their AI, whitewashing credit applications, and so many. There's the I'm thinking of the example of self-driving cars that were basically ignoring Black pedestrians. Terrible, terrible things that can come out of not bad intentions. I'm sure the company didn't sit there and go, this is what I want to do. Rather, it's a lack of control, a lack of governance, and a lack of ethics, ethical control.
Sean, that's not good enough for these companies, right? I'm going to call it out here. Just because GPS coordinates are the proxy for institutionalized racism doesn't mean that there was a failure at the design and the governance control level, right? If I say people in Ealing don't get the credit, or people in Southall, which happens to be a predominantly South Asian community, compared to a slightly higher Caucasian area in Richmond, right? Whose fault is that? It sounds like if you don't have explainable AI, then it doesn't matter what AI law you might be complying with. You're failing on data law, because you've failed the principles of equality that are enshrined in other areas of law. Just because it can be automated, or just because it can be computed, doesn't mean that it's going to be done so properly in the context of what is right and moral. Do you think large companies have a moral imperative to safeguard against these risks?
It's an excellent question. Personally, I think there is a moral obligation, but I think going beyond the moral obligation, there's a reputational risk to this. There's a financial risk to this. It isn't just a matter of, algorithmic bias being racial in nature or geographic in nature. It can be confirmation bias that attacks the bottom line. These are the sorts of things that, it's just a part of growing up an AI, if you will. And I think that's the key to remember.
And let's talk about our constituent users, right? So if data leaders, or the CDAAIO, we're going to run out of letters to put into this role, right? If it's our responsibility, we can't assume our business peers and colleagues, or the constituent users that we serve in our organizations, are going to be clued up and literate. We have to protect them. We have to educate them.
And that's the magic word: education. You need to make people aware, because right now they're not, and that's key. The business at large, and I think we're saying the same thing in two different ways. The business at large needs to have a better understanding, and of course, you're absolutely right. Today, that's not the case. I think it's incumbent upon data leaders to educate and to help people understand the limitations and the opportunities of AI going forward.
So if I could elaborate on that just a little.
Hang on, Ben. You can, but Dan's working with a broad spectrum of cutting edge businesses on this particular area. I want to yeah, Doc Dan, I want to hear from you first, and then Ben, I promise I'll let you answer.
And a lot of the focus is going on kind of the algorithmic bias and confirmation, and as Sean says, and it almost comes back to the very point said we weren't going to cover generalized intelligence. We're not, but we are going to have to come over, because it's not so much the decisions that we need to be paying attention to, it's the questions we're asking about AI. Because as we go on this journey of automation, as humans, responsible, ethical employees, we would think very carefully as we're going through a candidate list that we've got to make sure that we have a fair representation. But fundamentally, if we're asking if we're asking a college to make sure there's going to be a certain majority of black applicants, but there's no black applicants in those that are actually in that college, for instance, then we've got issues. So it's fundamentally, we need to be aware of the questions we're asking our AI and have that awareness of that to make sure that those decisions are going to be made with a smartly at the end of the day. Because we ask the wrong questions, it makes a difference how good the algorithm is at the end of the day.
I do acknowledge the irony of 3.5 white guys over the age of
Not
X
lost on that.
talking about confirmation bias. That's not lost on me. Ben.
So going back to, I guess, Dan's earlier point associated with the definition of AI, it's sort of machines behaving in a human-like or an animal-like way. Effectively, if you remove AI from the equation entirely here and say, what business outcomes are you trying to achieve, i.e. the questions, and what business outcomes are actually happening or at risk of happening if you deploy this technology, then which is mimicking the way that humans effectively might have done that kind of thing, then effectively it's coming back to the ethics of business. And this is a tool that can massively accelerate those kind of outcomes. And so it needs that much more governance and control and understanding and testing. There's a couple of angles that I think are often not discussed, is actually that models rot over time, and that actually they require continual oversight, retraining, and making sure that the data sets that they're being retrained with aren't introducing new biases that had previously been weeded out, and also detecting, is it doing exactly what is the outcome matching what you're trying to achieve, and so that's something that only humans can really do effectively at the moment. And there might be situations in the future where AI is looking after portions of other AI to make sure that it's behaving as expected on our behalf, but which is highly imaginable in the near future. But for the time being, if people as organizations, they need to first of all understand their business. So they need to have an understanding of the ethics associated with what they're trying to achieve as an organization. And there's countless sort of ways in which you can put that in place. They need a code of conduct in terms of the way that they're interacting with AI as an organization. They're comfortable that people are well educated associated with the risks associated with that and how they're behaving with that in terms of sharing data, in terms of the potential undesirable outcomes. And then as things are being developed and tested, people need to be considering all of the potential outcomes and pitfalls associated with the unexpected or unhappy paths, as we would call it in business architecture, and then make sure that those are appropriately mitigated with controls or retraining and so on. But it's a continuous process. This is almost AI ops.
What's the role of personal accountability? You can't just say, oh, my boss asked me to do this, or, oh, we're a team, good luck pinning the liability on, my limited liability AI entity, right? So we'll probably write about liability and the apportionment of liability later on, but you've mentioned something fascinating. Now, there are two flavors. There's the offensive and the slightly less offensive. So I'm going to tell you both, right? Why shouldn't you marry your brother or your sister? This is the Ouroboros problem when it comes to model drift and model rot. If a whole lot of marketing people generate a whole lot of content that then ends up becoming the next version of the recent surface web that then feeds back to train the model, what do you have? The most perfect version of model rot, because AI ends up poisoning itself. And this is why, if you think about the amount of AI generated, the amount of ChatGPT generated garbage, like, hey, great post, I really found it inspirational, or, you know, just these long waffly paragraphs that don't really say anything, that's actually becoming the input for the next training data set when we look at, you know, what does the internet look like in November 2024. It's going to end up poisoning itself. And I think there were some studies that looked at how many generations of this model can we drift to before it just starts feeding garbage. I think we've got
in many ways this is empowering for the enterprise, though, Frank, for the employees at the end of the day, because we're all consumers and users of data at the end of the day. And actually, as this data is across our organization and its individuals have it, and they can actually empower the artificial intelligence that's in it, it actually allows this data to be valuable, and it actually might allow your workforce to not see this as a report that sits on their hard drive or in the cloud. It's something that can be across their data systems, can be used to actually improve not just what their piece of little project is, but across the group organization at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So this is actually a great way. This whole democratization can be actually empowered by AI, because these silos can be, AI can interpret a lot of these silos and work across it and understand the risks associated with it. So there's risks there, but there's a massive opportunity and uplift for those who embrace it and have the right strategy.
I think you're bang on. We were looking at the risks as they related to the individual, the person who has been impacted by something bad as a result of poor AI controls, but we haven't really thought about systemic risk, like
Absolutely.
And Frank,
the
there's
Ouroboros
a precedent. There is an interesting precedent, literally in AI, where algorithmic trading, the early days of algorithmic trading in investment banking,
flash crash.
Exactly. So all of the models were too similar, and they were all offloading or buying things, you know, suddenly at the same time, which ended up, you know, as a systemic problem. So you know, you do have to think when testing these things in terms of the success. One of the other algorithms that's been incredibly successful is the attention economy. So we know that obviously social media algorithms are there to grab people's attention. They're very successful. In fact, they're so successful that it's actually, you know, in some cases, you know, splitting people's opinions and dividing societies. It's also, you know, ruining people's mental health when taken too far. So these are things that wouldn't be obvious at the individual level, but when they're systemic across a thing, then other solutions need to come in to help temper the overall systemic impact.
Ben, you've rounded off beautifully, and we've only got 2 key points to make here, so I'm going to keep it quick. Are we ready? We talk about functional readiness. Sean's ready, Ben's ready, Dan's ready, Frank's ready to go because we've been doing this intensively for 12 months. But does that mean we're organizationally ready? We often confuse the two. So, fact versus fear. What's coming for 2024? What does it look like? What's already here? I think, Sean, I'm going to ask you to go first. I recently installed Copilot, and it wrote you a beautiful email that I don't remember sending you.
Oh, well, you got to send it. You got to send it. I'm really excited about Copilot. I mean, I think Copilot is one of the technologies that is coming that's going to leverage AI within business. It's out now, and that's a key point to remember. So if it's fact versus fear, fact, AI assisted technology is already there. It's already probably in your organization, either, well, I should say, whether you want it or not. If you've got BAs, if you've got DAs, if you've got TAs, what's the temptation level for them to go over your firewall and, you know, snap a photo, send it to the right bot to give some analysis? Important points. So fact is, AI is there. Fear or fiction or whatever you want to call it is that, you know, AI is going to intuitively produce these things without human input and without good data backing it up, and that's the key. So I think the fear is, or the fiction is, that that this is all just going to happen and people are going to be cut out of the process, and that's obviously not true.
There, a few months ago, a travel company that shall not be named was experimenting with LLM capabilities in their chatbot, and they accidentally deployed it live. And I managed to get this very reputable brand's chatbot to show me how to cook methamphetamine.
Hey,
So let's talk. We'll talk about controls another time. Ben, you know, depending on whether I want to bury my head in the sand or whether I want to lean in and embrace this as the happy, clappy, overzealous data dude that I am, it all boils down to how can I extract value from this, right? So what's coming next year, what's already here, and what can I really just ignore? I just don't have to worry. I don't worry that the robots are coming to take over the nuclear bombs, but equally there's other stuff that you have highlighted. So what's coming for next year, basically?
Wow. So it's been moving so incredibly fast that I think the first thing that I would say is nobody can systemically answer that question accurately right now. And I'm mindful that this webinar will outlive the question.
Well, actually, I've asked ChatGPT 4 here what it thinks.
Fantastic. Well, look, should we play off my answer against that? What I would say is, any organizations that's looking into this right now needs to make sure that they're not just polarizing and committing on one technology or one platform. I think there are a range of different platforms, even in the time since ChatGPT went live. A large number of different large language models are competing in, and they're actually, you know, there are benefits associated with them. So actually understanding the landscape, understanding the capabilities. Also, one of the things I think that's going to be more clearer is, to your point, Frank, better understanding of the liability associated between the people who provided the AI and the people operating the AI. There's a lot of legal cases going on associated with, particularly with the use of images and their origin, how those are being reused, and some of those have concluded, but I wouldn't say that there's a consensus associated with that across the industry. So people need to be cognizant of how human race in general is actually adapting its legal and regulatory and policy framework associated with this, and make sure that you're not wrong-footed by it. And it's about common sense here. There are a lot of best practices out there that people can follow to be cautiously optimistic associated with the use of it. I would say that there's the kind of things that I'm most excited are, I mean, when we talked about semantic discovery earlier, the majority of organizations are not using the vast majority of the data that they actually hold for the benefit of their organization and their customers. And that's just because the sheer scale of semantic tagging, when it's done manually or it isn't done through an automatic manner, is a big limiting factor. We've talked about how that can be addressed using things like semantic discovery and, of course, data fabric, which I dedicate a huge amount of my time to. So incredible opportunities for that. I think that's the thing. That's one of the things I'm most excited about as a data and business architect.
Fantastic answer. Thank you, Ben. Dan, you and I have been debating the dawn of AI, and I think we came up with a construct that narrow intelligence only works where you have a defined problem and a measurable goal. Defined problem, measurable goal, that covers everything from how transformers work to why AlphaGo beat itself and how it taught itself to play Go. So defined problem, measurable goal. Tell me, are we really at the infancy of this technology? If it's been around since the 60s, are we anywhere close What's coming next?
So although I see it as an evolution, a lot of what's been going on, because this technology has been, and capabilities have been around, or know-how and algorithms have been around since the 60s, it will feel like a revolution at the end of the day. Because for the enterprise, in the same sense that the whole, the industrial revolution was on the backbone of coal, and we had steam engines, and then we had that whole thing with gas, and we ended up with kind of vehicles, and in the next revolution, and then we ended up with the electronic revolution, with sprouting up in Japan, and the energy revolution of nuclear and everything else, before you moved into the dawn of the internet revolution, which it is gonna feel, if it is maybe classed as the revolution of AI. But the fact that this is just an evolving set of technologies that are growing is beside the point. And the fundamental thing for the enterprise level is, just like all those other revolutions, you can either kind of rush into it with enthusiasm and then fall flat on your face as you've made some bad decisions, or you are going to be the ostrich in the sand who then realizes they have to procure something quickly, but without giving it thought and attention, and they end up with something that's a bad product or service. But you can take a measured, strategic view that's part of your standard business processes on where you're going to incorporate into artificial intelligence into enterprise, how you're going to do it, and build it into standard business as usual. And yes, narrow AI is with us now, but we're going to see new technologies in narrow AI. So just where you might have a system for a device to solve one particular problem, you'll see new algorithms kick in.
All right, one sentence each. All right. I'm going to go with adopt the mindset of the curious pragmatist when it comes to creating a safe space for AI and learning. We're in the point where a sandbox or an AI lab could cost £0 for a company like mine, or it could cost $500 million for a company like Ben's. Adopt the mindset of the curious pragmatists. Ben, one sentence.
Adopt, embrace, but the fundamentals of business, good business, do not change.
Elegant in its simplicity. Dan.
Yeah, I'm going to sound a bit like an echo chamber here. At the end of the day, AI is a great opportunity. It will have risks, just like all new opportunities do. Leverage it, take advantage of it, build on it. It isn't going to go away at the end of the day.
Or get run over by it. Sean, conclude us off. What actionable steps can we take to get ready for this?
It's a very important question. So first things first, we've been talking about this throughout the talk. Data feeds AI. So make sure that the fundamentals are right. Benchmark your data capabilities. Understand where your data is, what it's doing, and as Ben says, make sure it's high quality, the highest quality you can get. The more that you do that, the more you can explore leveraging AI solutions in a safe and manageable way. But I agree with you, Frank. It needs to be in a sandbox first. It needs to be very much kind of closed off. There needs to be a lot of innovation happening, but it needs to be done in a controlled way so that you can mitigate a lot of the risks that we talked about here, which are institutional in nature and can devastate a company if not monitored. That being said,
come in on that, I would say
please,
embed AI within your existing business units. Don't fall into the trap of creating the AI division. AI is something that's going to be part of the data flow, your business flow, your way you save costs, the way you generate revenue.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you very much. We're coming up to time. I want to make it abundantly clear that this is an evolving discussion, right? We're going to probably need to do this again 6 months from now, and I look forward to that episode. Thank you so much. Sean Russell, Ben Clinch, Dr. Dan Ballin, you guys have been an amazing panel. Before you go, we will do a Q&A now, but I want you to, if you're in the audience, scan that QR code. It's the final data leadership session of the year, and it's going to be quite the one, right? We've got some big names there. It's going to be a Christmas fireside splat, according to our marketing department. It's going to be on the 12th of December. What it's actually going to be is a roundup of all of the things that you might have missed, with short curated expert commentary and a very important look at cutting the noise. Where do we need to invest for next year? Everybody should connect with Sean here. Sean is our man. And then Ben and Dan, if you want to pop your LinkedIn here as well. I'm sure there will be a flood of people who want to connect with you, but Sean's the main man.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to speaking with all of you.
Right? This is the 5th one. I'd be really grateful if you took some time, fill in the survey. Feedback helps us get better. Just to round off, whilst you're filling out the survey here, key takeaways. Number 1, adopt the mindset of the curious pragmatist. Enable decision-making that is both grounded in the business reality, but also open to new ideas. Point number 2, let's take care to address responsible usage, things like explainable AI, being able to recognize the lineage and the chain of custody of things, avoiding risks of things going wrong at scale without compromising innovation. Consider the role of training, considering the role of a readiness assessment, something that Ortecha can definitely help you with, and the cultural change that comes from this opportunity. Finally, let's think about sorting the data foundations first. As Ben has mentioned, quality data is the cornerstone of success when you're leveraging narrow AI. Ortecha is obviously the right place to start. They're our wonderful benefactors for this data leadership series, so I'm going to give them a plug. But they absolutely deserve it. If you are looking to get the foundations right for EDM, you can't find anybody better aligned to EDM Council, the DCAM framework, CDMC. They're the ones to talk to. Think big, start small in the sandbox. Like all 4 of us have mentioned, the opportunity is vast. You're either going to be steamrolled, you're either going to be a curious pragmatist mindset. Take a steady approach, right? In some instances, move fast and break things is kind of cool for proving and prototyping, but when it comes to rolling stuff out, slow is steady and steady is fast. So think about your approach to adopting AI that accelerates things, embedded in your products, your systems, your value creation workflows. Think about how it all fits together. And then finally, come along on the 12th. We'll be sending out the email invitations, but definitely come along on the 12th. Now, I'm going to stop the recording because this is where we're at. Thank you so much for attending. I know we've had people from far-flung places, stateside. I'm going to keep this open for another 5 minutes. We're going to stop the recording so we can have more of a protected session. But I know that there are some of you who have some burning questions that you'd like to ask.